What if the deepest wounds are healed not by words, but by quiet presence? And what if a silent patient, believed lost to his own despair, holds the key to a truth that could change everything? Before we step into this powerful story of compassion, resilience, and an unbreakable human spirit, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and tell us in the comments if you believe silence can truly be full of love. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale, clinical glow across the quiet rehabilitation ward. Room 14 was at the very end of the corridor, tucked behind double doors that rarely opened without purpose. It was nearing the end of Amelia's shift, and her feet ached with the weight of 12 long hours, but she moved with steady, practiced hands and a quiet grace. She paused outside the door, took a fortifying breath, then pushed it open. Inside, Leo sat as he always did, back ramrod straight, hands resting calmly on his lap, eyes focused on a point somewhere just past the edge of the room. He did not blink as she entered. He never flinched. He never spoke. Amelia closed the door behind her with a quiet click and rolled the small medical cart to the side of his chair. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic, a harsh counterpoint to the lemon oil she had started using last month. Hoping, somewhere deep inside, it offered something gentle. "Time for your dressing change," she said softly, more out of habit than necessity. She reached for the bandage kit, then knelt beside him and carefully began to unwind the gauze around his forearm. His skin was pale and cool, and the old wound, self-inflicted before he was transferred here, was healing but slowly. She worked in silence for a while, the only sound the quiet rustle of fabric and the occasional beep from the monitor in the corner. Then, without meaning to, she spoke again. "You know," she muttered, her voice low, half to herself, half to the stillness, "I wouldn't mind so much that you don't talk if you would just stop staring like that." She paused, glancing up at his face. "It's like you are memorizing me, or waiting for me to say something important. But you never blink. It is kind of creepy, honestly." She expected no response. She always spoke like this around him, pouring her quiet thoughts into the void, but tonight felt different. When she met his gaze, something inside her skipped. His eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her chest tighten, made her breath catch. They were not vacant. They were not lost. They were profoundly present. "God, you are doing it again," she whispered, a sudden tremor in her voice. "That look." She reached up to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, then returned her focus to the fresh gauze, trying to regain her composure. "You don't talk, fine, but don't look at me like that, like I am someone you used to know." She blinked hard and kept working, but her hands had started to tremble. She cursed under her breath, not from anger, but from something else, an emotion she could not yet name, a terrifying, beautiful recognition. As she secured the final strip of bandage, her fingertips accidentally brushed the inside of his wrist. Leo blinked. It was subtle, deliberate, not a reflex. She froze, her gaze shooting up to meet his again. His expression had not changed, but the weight in his stare had shifted. It was like standing at the edge of something vast, like the profound silence just before a storm breaks. Amelia took a step back, her pulse thudding loud in her ears. She swallowed. "I don't know what you were trying to say with your eyes," she said, her voice quieter now, more uncertain. "But if you are in there, you are scaring the hell out of me." Still, he said nothing, but something had shifted in the room. The stillness was no longer empty. Amelia gathered the used supplies, packed them into the tray, and rolled it slowly toward the door. She paused with her hand on the handle and glanced back one last time. Leo had not moved, but his eyes, those intense, unblinking eyes, were watching her as if she had already changed something profound inside him. She stepped out into the hallway, the door closing softly behind her, and inside the quiet room, Leo finally blinked again. What do you think is the true meaning behind Leo's intense, silent gaze? And what profound impact has Amelia unknowingly had on him? Share your insights in the comments below. If this intriguing beginning has you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for the next part of this unfolding mystery. Amelia didn't become a nurse because she loved hospitals. She became a nurse because she knew, intimately, what it was like to lose someone slowly, helplessly, while the system stumbled behind bureaucracy and missed calls. Her younger brother, Liam, had been the softest, most vulnerable part of her world. Diagnosed with severe autism at a young age, he spoke little but loved fiercely. He hummed lullabies instead of singing them, drew vivid pictures of trees with purple trunks, and clung to Amelia as if she were the only person who understood the unique language he could not speak. She had learned to read his silences, to fill in the gaps with gentle touch, with unwavering presence, with the calm, rhythmic beat of her breath beside his. When he was 10, Liam had a seizure at home while Amelia was babysitting. She was just 16. The ambulance took too long to arrive, the dispatcher took too long to understand, the hospital took too long to act. By the time her mother finally arrived, Amelia was in the back of the ambulance, holding her brother's small hand as the flashing lights blurred through her desperate tears. Liam died the next morning. His death was ruled unfortunate and unpreventable. Amelia never believed that. So, she became a nurse, not with the grand ambition to save everyone, but with a fierce, quiet promise. No one under her care would ever wait in silence, wondering if they truly mattered. She had worked in bustling pediatric units, somber psychiatric wards, the chaotic rush of emergency triage, but it was the quiet, forgotten rehabilitation center where she finally stayed. It wasn't glamorous. It was a place where the long, arduous fights happened, where healing crawled instead of raced, where presence mattered more than procedures. Her shifts were long, her pay modest, and the weight of her own lingering grief still lived beneath her ribs like a quiet, persistent ache. But she came in early and left late. She learned her patients' rhythms, their unspoken fears, their favorite songs. She ironed their pillowcases with her palms, brought chamomile tea in a thermos for the elderly woman in room 3 who cried at night. She wrote small, hopeful notes, "You're stronger than you think," or "Hope is real even on bad days," and tucked them into dresser drawers like hidden treasures. She cared because it was the only thing she knew how to do, the only way to honor Liam's memory. But with Leo, something was distinctly different. He had arrived 6 months ago, tall, utterly silent, with unreadable eyes and scars that looked ancient and deep, even the ones not visible to the naked eye. His paperwork labeled him selectively mute, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. The details surrounding his transfer were sparse. No family ever visited. No one ever claimed him. His existence in room 14 had become a rigid routine. Meals untouched, therapy sessions unattended, and a profound stillness that felt almost intentional, like a deliberate choice to withdraw from the world. At first, Amelia treated him like any other patient, performing routine check-ins, hygiene care, administering medication. But over time, she felt herself irresistibly drawn in by the immense space he occupied, the profound silence he held. His stillness did not feel like absence, felt like waiting. She started speaking to him during tasks, small things at first, descriptions of the weather outside, what she had for lunch, snippets of her day. Then stories began to flow. "My mom used to make soup just like this," she said one evening, as she gently placed his untouched tray down. She would hum and stir like she was conducting a symphony. Another time, while carefully adjusting his blanket, she whispered, "Liam used to hate having the window open. He said the wind made the air feel too fast." She never expected a response. That wasn't the point. She needed to speak the memories aloud, to give voice to her own quiet grief. And, in a strange, profound way, Leo had become her tether to something unspoken, a silent confidant. Each evening, before ending her shift, she would pull a chair beside his bed and tell him one small thing about her life. Sometimes it was trivial. "I saw a dog in a raincoat today, red, with matching boots. I think he liked the attention." Other times it was heavy, raw truth. "I still blame myself for Liam. Even when people say not to, it doesn't go away." And Leo listened, or at least he gave her the space to believe he did. That was enough. She didn't know why she believed his silence was a choice, a fortress he had built, but she did. There was something in the way he tilted his head when she spoke, the subtle flicker in his eyes when she laughed, as though he were carefully storing every word, every emotion, in a vast, hidden vault behind his stillness. Amelia didn't think of it as therapy. It was simply what she did, because silence had once taken someone she loved, and now, she filled that silence, one story at a time, determined it would never claim another. What profound truth do you think Leo's silence is hiding? And how is Amelia unknowingly creating a path for him to heal? Share your insights in the comments below. If this deeply emotional story of connection and unspoken understanding is touching your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for the next pivotal chapter. Before silence completely consumed his life, Leo Romano possessed a voice that shaped skylines. He was one of the youngest lead architects in his firm, celebrated for his intuitive, human-centered designs. His buildings weren't merely structures. They breathed, curved, and opened themselves to light. He believed architecture could heal, that the spaces people inhabited could profoundly change how they felt, how they loved, how they mourned. He had built vibrant community centers, welcoming libraries, inspiring art schools. But the last project he ever touched was the one that utterly shattered everything. It was meant to be a modest housing complex, affordable, safe, and elegant in its simplicity. He had personally overseen every line, every angle, every exit. Except one. A fatal miscalculation, buried deep in the intricate plans. A flawed ventilation route, a failed fire escape system. It was tragically missed during inspection, missed again during construction, and then, one brutal winter night, a fire erupted on the third floor. He lost his beloved wife, Sophia, and their precious daughter, Maya, trapped in apartment 3C. The news articles didn't mention his name. The city filed devastating lawsuits. The firm went eerily silent, burying its head in the sand. The insurance companies, as they always do, paid, buried the truth under mountains of paperwork, and moved on. But Leo could not. Not when every blueprint he had ever drawn now lived beneath the crushing weight of two cold headstones. In the agonizing weeks that followed, he barely spoke. He refused legal counsel, therapy, the desperate pleas of his family. He simply disappeared. When they finally found him sitting on a park bench in the silent snow, his fingers frostbitten, his clothes stained with soot, he had not uttered a single word, just stared blankly ahead as if watching something only he could see, a phantom horror. They brought him to the facility under voluntary psychiatric care. He never resisted, never explained. He simply stopped speaking, stopped reacting, existing as nothing more than a physical form, a shell of the man he once was. That was until Amelia. She did not know who he was, what he had done, the profound tragedy that had consumed him. That made her different. She did not look at him with pity or anger. She just looked and spoke, as if her gentle words were sunlight, and she was pouring them, one quiet beam at a time, into his frozen, wounded chest. What profound impact do you think Amelia's consistent, gentle presence has on a soul as broken as Leo's? And how does one truly begin to heal from such an unimaginable loss? Share your insights in the comments below. If this raw, emotional story of a quiet awakening is touching your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for the next pivotal chapter. At first, Leo rigidly ignored her stories. He counted the ceiling tiles, traced the lines of the radiator with his eyes, desperate to maintain his self-imposed stillness. But then, something shifted. One night, she mentioned a dress her mother used to wear, a vibrant green with sunflowers along the hem. Leo remembered Sophia had one like that too, not identical but close enough to stir something ancient, something deeply buried, inside him. So he started drawing again secretly. Not buildings, not blueprints, just images. A green dress with sunflowers, a steaming bowl of soup in a chipped yellow bowl, a little boy holding a paper bird, vivid details from the mundane stories Amelia shared so casually, so vulnerably. He sketched them on the backs of menus, on patient feedback forms, on blank pages he tore from the corners of staff bulletins. He never let anyone see. He folded each drawing carefully and tucked them into the bottom drawer of the cabinet beside his bed, beneath a stack of worn-out socks. They were not for the world, not even for her. They were a desperate way to feel again. Every line was a fragile breath, every color, a whispered secret. He began to anticipate her shifts, a subtle tremor of expectation in his otherwise rigid routine. He noticed the delicate perfume she wore on Fridays, the slight limp she tried to hide when her ankle flared. He saw the graceful way her hands moved when she told her stories, like she was painting pictures in the air, bringing life to the emptiness around him. Her kindness wasn't grand. It was made of small, consistent things. Refilling his water glass with ice the way he preferred, silently placing a folded blanket over his knees without a word, adjusting the blinds so the light fell just right across the room, illuminating his silent world. And somehow, little by little, the impenetrable silence inside him softened, cracked, allowing a sliver of warmth to seep in. He was still a man who had unwittingly caused a tragedy, still a man carrying grief like a perpetual shadow, but Amelia, her unwavering presence, her persistent voice, her quiet, tenacious belief in something inherently good, had begun to draw new lines in his soul again. And for the first time in years, Leo wondered if maybe he was not completely beyond saving. The notice came on a Monday morning, folded neatly inside her staff mailbox like any other routine update. Amelia opened the envelope absent-mindedly, sipping lukewarm coffee, her mind already on her patient's charts. But as her eyes skimmed the words, her heart dropped. She was being transferred. The letter was formal and politely worded. Due to recent staff restructuring, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for reassignment to the Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Unit, effective next week. It was a promotion in name, a lateral move in practice, but it was not what she wanted, not now. Her first instinct was to march into the administrator's office and protest, to fight the cold, bureaucratic decision, but she knew it was futile. The decision had already been made, sealed by unseen hands. Her supervisor offered a congratulatory smile, mentioning how well she connected with patients, how much good she could do in the new unit. Amelia nodded, mumbled a thank you, and walked out, blinking against the sudden, sharp sting behind her eyes. She spent the rest of the day in a daze, moving through her rounds like a ghost, her touch distant, her words mechanical. But when it came time to visit Leo in room 14, something deep inside her tightened, a painful knot of regret. She entered room 14 as she always did, tray in hand, chart tucked under her arm. He was already sitting up, waiting, his gaze fixed on the doorway. Amelia smiled, but it was thinner than usual, fragile. "Hi, Leo," she said gently. "I brought your tea. Cinnamon. I know it's your favorite." He did not move, but his eyes followed her, steady, watchful, absorbing every nuance of her movement. She sat beside him as she had hundreds of times before, the familiar creak of the chair a comforting sound in the quiet room. Her fingers traced the edge of the teacup before she looked up at him, her voice quieter now, filled with a raw vulnerability. "They're transferring me to another unit." A pause. "I didn't ask for it," she added quickly. "But they say it's a good opportunity, more responsibility, new patients." Still no reaction. Leo remained utterly still, his eyes unblinking. Amelia chuckled, a humorless, broken sound. "You're probably thinking I'll be out of your hair." She waited for something, anything, a blink, a shift in his posture, a subtle flicker in his eyes. Nothing came, so she reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. The cover was soft brown leather, its corners slightly worn from her constant handling. She placed it gently on the bedside table beside him. "I wrote down some of the stories I used to tell you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Not all of them, but the ones I think you might want to read someday." She stood up, adjusted the blanket on his lap one last time, brushing invisible creases with trembling hands. Then she leaned down, her lips barely touching his ear, and whispered, "If there ever comes a day when you're ready to speak, Leo, I hope the first name you say is mine." She kissed her fingertips and touched them lightly, tenderly, to his shoulder. Then she turned and walked out without looking back. The door clicked softly behind her, a final, heartbreaking sound. Leo stared at the notebook for a long, timeless moment. The room around him suddenly felt colder, emptier in a way that was profoundly different than before. The silence no longer wrapped him like armor. It pressed in, heavy and suffocating, like a crushing weight. Slowly, almost reverently, he reached out and picked up the notebook. His fingers ran over the soft leather cover, then opened to the first page. There, in her familiar handwriting, was a simple, unspoken message. Even silence can be full of love. He turned the page. A story about her brother, Liam. Another about her mother's garden. One about a birthday she had spent alone, eating cake by candlelight and pretending it was enough. By the time he reached the end, his hands were shaking, and for the very first time since the fire that shattered his world, tears slipped silently down his face. They fell without a sound, carving hot, painful paths down skin that had known only stillness for years. His shoulders trembled with suppressed emotion, but he did not call after her. Not yet. He pressed the notebook to his chest, clutching it tightly, as if it could anchor him to something that felt dangerously like hope. And he waited in a silence that, finally, had profoundly changed. What do you think is the profound significance of Leo's first tears in years? And how will Amelia's departure trigger a new turning point in his healing journey? Share your raw emotions in the comments below. If this deeply poignant story of unspoken connection is touching your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for the next pivotal chapter. It had been 23 agonizing days since Amelia last walked the hushed halls of the rehabilitation wing. Her new unit was efficient, busier, more structured. She worked with intricate charts and demanding therapy schedules, medication regimens, and patient behavior logs. Her co-workers praised her dedication, her calm presence, her almost miraculous touch with difficult patients. But Amelia felt like she was operating at a distance, from herself, from her heart. Each day, a small, persistent ache lived in the back of her chest, a quiet echo of the silent patient she had left behind. She carried it silently, until the message came. She was midway through meticulously reviewing a patient's cognitive assessment when her name resonated over the intercom, clear and urgent. Nurse Amelia Davis, please report to Ward 2, Room 14. Couldn't be. She blinked, slowly closed the file in front of her, and stood without a word, her feet moving before her brain could catch up, drawn by an invisible thread. The hallway felt longer than she remembered, the walls taller, the air heavier, charged with an unspoken tension. When she reached the door, the same worn wooden plaque still hung outside. Leo Romano, a nurse, Chloe, met her at the door, her eyes wide with disbelief, her voice lowered to an astonished whisper. He spoke, Chloe said, her words barely audible. Just now, he said your name, and that he needs to speak to you. Only you. Amelia's breath caught, a sharp, sudden gasp. Without waiting for permission, she pushed open the door. Leo was seated in the same chair, as if time had paused since she last left. But something was profoundly different. His posture was less rigid. His hands rested softly on his knees, and his face, though still lined with shadows, held something new, something fragile, utterly unexpected. Peace. He looked at her and smiled. Not wide, not bright, but real, a flicker of light in his once vacant eyes. She stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her. Her voice, when it came, was a mere whisper. Hi. His eyes never left hers, holding her gaze with an intensity that pulled her in. Then, slowly, his lips parted. I heard you, he said, his voice hoarse from disuse, like dry paper catching a reluctant flame. Every night. Amelia's knees nearly gave out beneath her. She grabbed the edge of the chair beside him, lowering herself gently, her breath trembling, her mind reeling. You heard me? She said, barely able to form the words. He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. Every story, every laugh, every silence. Her eyes filled, blurring his face into a soft, beautiful haze. Why didn't you say anything? I couldn't, he said, his voice raw. Not because I wasn't able. Because I wasn't worthy. She shook her head gently, not understanding. I need to tell you something, he continued, his hands gripping the edges of the chair now, knuckles white, holding himself together. I was an architect. My last project was a residential building. Past inspections. It had my name on every line. My wife, Sophia, and daughter, Maya, lived on the 3rd floor. He paused, his breath shallow, reliving the nightmare. There was a fire. Something failed in the design. People say it was the wiring. But I know. It was me. I missed something. I didn't see. I should have seen. Amelia did not move. She did not speak. She only listened, her heart aching with his unspoken burden. They died, he said, his voice cracking, fracturing the last remnants of his composure. Sophia and Maya. I buried them in winter, and I buried myself with them. His shoulders trembled with suppressed sobs, tears catching at the corners of his eyes, but not falling yet. I came here because I wanted to disappear, because I believed I deserved silence, that I had no right to speak again. He turned toward her, finally, fully, his eyes searching hers, desperate for understanding. But then you came, and you spoke, and sang, and told me about your brother, your mother, your lonely birthdays. You told me everything without asking anything back. He reached into the drawer beside him and pulled out the small, worn notebook she had left. He held it carefully, almost reverently, like something sacred, a lifeline. You said, if the day comes that I speak, I hope the first name I say is yours. He placed the notebook gently on her lap, then looked into her eyes, clear, unwavering, utterly vulnerable. So, here I am, Amelia, saying your name. A profound silence fell between them. Not the kind that wounded, not the kind that stifled, but the kind that healed. She reached for his hand, taking it into hers. It was warm, alive, pulsing with a life she hadn't known it still possessed. You are not your silence, she said, her voice shaking with raw emotion. And you're not the worst thing you've done. He looked down, his voice barely audible, filled with an ancient pain. But can I be forgiven? She squeezed his hand, her gaze unwavering. You already are. What profound impact do you think Leo's confession and Amelia's forgiveness will have on their journey to healing? And what does it truly mean to be unworthy of love? Share your raw emotions and predictions in the comments below. If this deeply moving story of redemption and breakthrough is touching your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for the next pivotal chapter. It was a quiet afternoon, days after Leo's first fragile words had unraveled the suffocating silence that had held him prisoner for so long. Amelia returned to the ward more frequently now, not as his assigned nurse, but as someone who simply wanted to be near him, drawn by an invisible thread. Their conversations were still gentle, sometimes sparse, but each word, each shared glance, was filled with more meaning than pages of dialogue. They sat together in stillness, shared quiet mugs of tea, and walked slowly through the sun-dappled gardens when the weather allowed. One day, as she arrived with a book tucked under her arm, a nurse named Chloe caught her in the hallway. Hey, Amelia, Chloe said, gently taking her arm. There's something I think you should see. Leo's art. He's been drawing for months. He never let anyone in the room, but this morning he specifically asked if I could bring you. Amelia followed without question, her heart quickening with a mix of curiosity and anticipation. They passed through a corridor she had rarely entered, a quieter section of the facility used for creative therapy. Chloe led her to a small room at the very end, its door left slightly ajar. Inside, sunlight spilled through tall windows, illuminating canvases, sketch pads, and vibrant watercolor stains on the polished floor. It took Amelia a moment to breathe, her vision blurring with sudden emotion. The room was utterly filled with Leo's heart. Dozens of drawings, some framed, others taped loosely to the walls, surrounded her. Pencil sketches, raw charcoal portraits, soft pastels, and luminous watercolors, but they were not random. They were profoundly familiar. She stepped closer to one canvas. Her mother's smile, not from a photograph, but exactly how Amelia had once described it. Crooked on the left with a unique dimple that only appeared when she was about to say something mischievous. Next to it, another painting. Her childhood home, a pale yellow house with white shutters and a sagging porch swing. She had spoken of it once, offhandedly, during a night when she was too tired to guard her memories. Further down, the bistro from her hometown, rendered in warm, inviting tones. She had described the irresistible scent of cinnamon rolls that drifted onto the sidewalk at sunrise, and in the painting, the golden light poured from its windows like a beacon. Her hands trembled as she turned to see more. A charcoal sketch of a little boy holding a paper crane with wide, innocent eyes and a shy smile. Liam. Amelia pressed her fingertips to her lips, trying to steady the overwhelming emotions swelling in her chest. Then she saw it, the most breathtaking of them all. A portrait of herself. Not drawn from life, not from a photograph, but from memory, from profound observation. She was laughing, her head tilted slightly, her eyes half closed in pure joy. Her hand was mid-gesture, like she had just told a funny joke or shared a whispered secret. Amelia gasped softly, tears brimming. Every detail was rendered with tender precision. Her curls a little messy, a coffee cup in her hand, the faint crease in her uniform from long hours of work. What profound truth does Leo's secret art reveal about his capacity for connection? And how do you think Amelia's perspective on communication and healing will change after witnessing this? Share your raw emotions in the comments below. If this deeply moving story of unspoken understanding is touching your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for the next pivotal chapter. Chloe stepped back, giving her space, her own eyes moist. He drew them all while he was still silent, she said quietly. I'd bring him supplies and just leave them here. He never said a word, but he never stopped drawing. Amelia stepped closer to the portrait of herself, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. She reached out and touched the edge of the canvas lightly, reverently, as if it were a fragile page from her own story, brought to life by someone else's unseen gaze. She turned slowly, taking in the entire room, the gallery of her life as seen through Leo's silent eyes. Each drawing, each meticulous brush stroke, was a love letter written without words, a profound response to her own vulnerability. And for the first time, she realized, he had been speaking all along. Through these drawings, he had answered every story she told. He had remembered the way her voice softened when she spoke of her mother. He had captured the bistro's golden windows from her imagination. He had drawn her brother's innocence from a single anecdote, and he had drawn her, fully, joyfully, at a time when she herself barely recognized that version. Her knees gave way slightly, and she sank onto the wooden stool in the center of the room, covering her mouth with one hand as tears streamed down her cheeks, hot and silent. Not from grief now, but from the overwhelming sensation of being seen, of being understood in a way she had never ever imagined. She looked up as the door creaked softly open. Leo stood there, quiet, watching her, his eyes holding something steady and vulnerable all at once. You remembered everything, she whispered, her voice trembling. He nodded. I didn't know how to speak, he said, stepping into the room, his voice still a little hoarse. But I listened. I listened to every word. And I didn't want your stories to disappear. Amelia stood slowly, her body moving without conscious thought, walked toward him, and without hesitation, wrapped her arms around him. He held her gently, carefully, like something cherished, something precious. You gave them back to me, she said against his shoulder, her voice muffled by tears. All of them. In that profound moment, words were no longer necessary. Everything they needed had already been said, in pencil, in paint, in a sacred silence finally understood. The sun had just begun to rise when Amelia arrived at the gates of the facility, a small overnight bag slung over her shoulder, her heart a blend of nerves and quiet hope. Leo stood waiting, already dressed, his own duffel bag in hand. He looked profoundly different in the soft morning light, less like a patient and more like the man he might have been, or perhaps, the man he was still bravely becoming. Amelia smiled, a radiant, hopeful curve of her lips. Ready? He nodded once, then glanced toward the open road, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in his hand. I think so. They boarded a bus bound for the countryside, a quiet town 3 hours away called Farnsworth, where Amelia's mother had grown up and where the air always smelled like lavender and freshly cut grass. Amelia hadn't been back in years, not since her mother's funeral, but something about returning there with Leo felt undeniably right. It was a new chapter to be written on familiar, healing soil. They sat side by side near the back of the bus. The gentle hum of the engine, the low murmur of a few early passengers, and the rhythmic swaying of the road created a quiet rhythm neither of them felt the need to fill with words. Amelia leaned her head gently against the window, watching trees blur into watercolor streaks against the dawning sky. Leo sat with his hands folded in his lap, occasionally stealing glances at her when he thought she wouldn't notice, his gaze soft, contemplative. Halfway through the journey, she reached into her bag and pulled out 2 sandwiches, handing him one without a word. He took it, a faint smile of thanks touching his lips, and for a while, they ate in comfortable, companionable silence. Then Leo spoke, his voice soft, deliberate, but clearer now, more resonant than before. I still don't know if I deserve this, he said, his eyes fixed on the rolling fields outside, as if searching for an answer in the passing landscape. This chance. There are days I wake up and completely forget what it feels like to be human, and there are nights I remember everything far too clearly. Amelia turned to him, listening intently, her heart aching with his unspoken burden. I know what I did or didn't do, he continued, the pain raw in his voice. The pain I caused, the people I failed, and I still carry it. Maybe I always will. But then he turned to look at her, truly look at her, his gaze vulnerable and earnest. I want to try. Amelia held his gaze for a long, quiet moment, and then she reached out and gently took his hand. It was the simplest of gestures, yet it carried the immense weight of everything they'd both been through. The stories, the silence, the hidden sketches, the shattering confessions, the long, lonely years. Her fingers wrapped around his with a quiet, unwavering certainty. We've both been broken in ways we never asked for, she said, her voice soft, infused with deep understanding. We've both made mistakes, but maybe that's the point. Leo tilted his head slightly, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. What do you mean? I mean, she said, smiling through the emotion in her voice. We're not here because we did everything right. We're here because we're still choosing to heal, choosing to believe, choosing to love again, even if it's messy, especially if it's messy. He let out a breath that sounded like profound relief, like a long-held release. Do you really think we deserve another chance? She squeezed his hand gently. I think we've already earned it. The bus turned down a long stretch of road lined with towering trees that swayed gently in the wind. In the distance, the quaint town of Farnsworth came into view. Small homes with vibrant flower boxes, a white steepled church, the bakery her mother used to take her to every Sunday. Leo looked out the window, then back at her, a profound realization dawning in his eyes. I've never had a place to start over, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Amelia leaned her head gently against his shoulder, her own voice just above a whisper. Now you do. They stayed like that for the rest of the ride, the peaceful countryside unfolding before them like a story waiting to be rewritten. Not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in shared sandwiches, long silences, and the soft, unwavering promise of one more chance. Not perfect, but profoundly real. 1 year later, the quaint town of Farnsworth, that once held Amelia's cherished childhood memories, now echoed with the vibrant sounds of new beginnings. In a sun-filled building at the edge of Main Street, nestled between the familiar post office and an old bookshop, stood the Harmony Center, a small but growing space dedicated to art therapy for patients with PTSD and other trauma conditions. Amelia ran it with quiet pride, her heart fully invested in the work. She taught writing workshops, hosted reflection circles, and guided patients through expressive storytelling, helping them find their voices through narrative. But the most popular class by far was visual voice, led by Leo. Leo, who once lived in the suffocating prison of silence, now taught others how to speak without words, through charcoal, paint, wood carving, and vibrant color. He worked patiently with veterans, abuse survivors, children who no longer trusted language, gently helping them navigate their inner worlds. He never pushed. He listened first, then patiently helped them find their own unique form of release. They worked side by side, their lives no longer defined by what they had lost, but by what they were meticulously building, one canvas, one story, one shared breath at a time. Amelia's small book was finally finished too, titled Stillness Speaks. It was a quiet compilation of stories, true, raw, and deeply human. Pages filled with moments of unnoticed kindness, of people who chose gentleness even when no one was watching. The opening dedication read, "For the first person who taught me that not all silence is emptiness. Some silences are full of love." The community gathered for the book's launch in the very same space where patients now found healing. Folding chairs lined the center room, sunlight pooled across the floor, and the comforting aroma of baked apple tarts drifted in from next door. Friends, patients, and neighbors filled the room, many having never known what Amelia and Leo had survived, but all drawn by the profound light and hope they now brought. As the event began, Leo sat quietly at a small upright piano, his fingers poised above the keys. He played something soft and slow, an original piece he had composed for Amelia. A melody without lyrics, just movement, memory, and grace. When he finished, Amelia stood before the room with the book in her hands. She read the final passage aloud, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I once cared for a man who would not speak. For months, I told him my stories, my regrets, my fears, never knowing if he heard me. But he did. Not only did he listen, he remembered. He gave me every word back, painted in silence." She paused, scanning the room, a profound understanding in her eyes. Then her gaze met Leo's. He rose slowly from the piano and crossed the floor to stand beside her. From his pocket, he pulled out a small, hand-carved wooden box. Inside was a simple, smooth wooden ring, warm with meaning. On the inside, etched in tiny, careful script, were the words, "We chose again." He went down on one knee. What profound emotions do you think this unexpected proposal evokes in Amelia and the audience? And what does "we chose again" truly symbolize for their journey? Share your raw emotions and predictions in the comments below. If this deeply moving story of love, resilience, and transformation is captivating you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for the final, heartwarming chapter. The entire room held its breath. "If you can forgive me," he said softly, his voice raw with vulnerability, "can you love me again?" Amelia's breath caught, tears brimming before she could stop them. She nodded, unable to speak at first, then whispered through the emotion, "Yes." Leo slid the ring onto her finger, and the room burst into a thunderous wave of applause. Some stood, some cried, all smiled, their faces reflecting the profound joy of the moment. They embraced, not as two people who had found a fairy tale, but as two souls who had chosen to rise from ruin, together. It was not a perfect love. It was something infinitely better, healed, honest, whole. And so, from shared silence to shared vows, Amelia and Leo reminded us that even the most broken hearts can find their way back to hope. One word, one gesture, one act of quiet love at a time. Their story is not just about healing, but about choosing to believe in life again, even after profound loss. Because sometimes, the most powerful love stories begin not with a kiss, but with a whisper in the dark. Hello everyone. If this story of love, overcoming adversity, and poetic justice touched your heart, don't hesitate to like it and share it with your friends and family. This is one of those stories that reminds us there is always light at the end of the tunnel and that true love arrives when we least expect it. Your support helps us continue creating content that inspires you. And if you'd like to see more stories like this, Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate notifications. We'd love to know what country you're watching us from. Tell us in the comments. Your opinion is very important to us and helps us create stories that resonate with our audience.